to the show, Scott and Graham. It's great to have you guys on our new show, CEO Interviews, and back to the Cannabis Podcast. It's been a year. We were just saying it's been a crazy, crazy year since last we talked. But it's great to have you guys on again. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having us. Appreciate it. Thank you, Raina.
Exactly. It has been a crazy year for sure.
Absolutely. So give us a bit of a rundown for listeners, viewers that are new to Cadiz and haven't heard of Glass House Farms before. Talk to us about, Cadiz and kind of give us a soundbite of what you guys are all about and how you came together with Glass House last year.
Sure, Scott, you want to start that and I'll layer on top?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. We are a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ. Our principal assets are natural resources, land and water. And we have been involved in farming on about 45,000 acres of land in eastern San Bernardino County for decades, principally in citrus and dried on the vine raisins for a long time. And then as the interest in hemp began to emerge, we thought that there was a great opportunity for us to be engaged in sustainable farming in a cutting edge new product that there was going to be a lot of demand for. We had a lot of inquiries about our suitability of our property to grow hemp, and the more we began to investigate it, the more excited we got. We are also in the midst of doing a large water conservation project, which is designed and in its intention to take water from where we are in the Mojave Desert and bring it for urban uses and agricultural uses elsewhere in the state. So we have sort of a capacity which is similar to a lot of farming operations in the Central Valley, where you can make decisions about the highest and best use of your water. And our intention is to marry both overlying farming uses with the export of water for municipal uses. So as we began to approach this, the more we learned about hemp, the more we liked it. We like its sustainability, we like its purpose, and we wanted to find a best-in-class partner. So we were introduced to Graham through a common friend, and it was fortuitous that everybody who came to approach us from around the country and actually even internationally that was interested in the hemp and cultivation space thought that Graham was the right person that they were proposing to bring to the table. And we thought, well, gee, we'll just go talk to him directly. And that couldn't have been made any more convenient, but for the fact that Graham actually lives within 5 miles of me. So we've been very pleased with our relationship. And I guess I would say the one thing that we felt was critical, and we believe that even more now than when we started, is that anybody can farm. It's not just the farming that we were interested in. What we were interested in was the fully integrated relationship where we would be able to farm it to spec, and then we would process it and ultimately have a distribution arm. And in candor, we have the prospect of a large cannabis retailer who's interested in the hemp space, who's already got a brand and a foothold, and we're marrying our hemp brand along with their retail distribution of cannabis, and we think that's very exciting.
And Graham, would you couch it in the same way? Would you feel like that's the partnership that kind of brought you guys together and made it attractive to you as well?
Yeah, so I'm the founder of Glass House Farms. We've been in the cannabis space for over half a decade now, which is kind of the oldest kid in the candy shop when it comes to legal and compliant cannabis. And I think it's worth remembering that hemp and marijuana, to use the kind of colloquial terms, they're the same plant, right? So one's a Chihuahua and one's a Saint Bernard, but they're both dogs. And we look at the lens through it as a cannabinoid product company. And many of those cannabinoids, and specifically every cannabinoid except for Delta-9 THC, can be cultivated in hemp. And when you get down to agricultural operations, you kind of you need land, water, and know-how, right? And so we have the know-how from being in that hemp and or the cannabis space for so long. And Scott and the crew at Cadiz have very large amounts of land and large amounts of water. And the project that we're working on in a partnership is, supportive and certainly not conflicting with their underlying, goals on the water side. So we decided to marry those things together and look at ways that we could, I think the days of farming hemp as you would alfalfa, you just, grow it and it's, here's a bale of it. Those days are that was the heyday and the wild swings and exuberance. Now it's into the stage where you need to be a product company, right? So you're farming to create products, not farming to just create biomass. And so, since the last time we've talked, we did one full successful harvest. We're now processing what we grew into various different products, all the way from tinctures to gummies to hemp cigarettes and, pre-rolls and things like that allow people to get access to cannabinoids, particularly in states where you don't have yet legal access. Those states are dwindling on the cannabis side, which may be opening up the door for the next phase of this, to Delta 8 gummies and things like that to help with sleep and anxiety and all the other things that those cannabinoids can do, right? Another example, CBN, a cannabinoid not many people have heard of, but fantastically helpful for sleep, right? And great replacement for pharmaceuticals. So we've got all those products now in the works from what we grew last season, and we're planting probably next week for this season. And on the agricultural side, we feed back that whole loop, right? We understand what the products need, and so we can grow it better so that we can deliver to the product team exactly what they wanted. And that's kind of the cycle that we're in now. And, certainly with the doors and the political climate starting to move, there's, again, hemp and marijuana are very close together. So if you've solved for one, in a large part, you've solved for the other. And, if doors open that allow us to go both directions, that would be pretty exciting as well.
And are you guys growing the cannabis? Are you staying mostly on where you were growing it prior to the partnership with Cadiz? Because I know there's an issue with growing hemp side by side with cannabis. Or have you also taken on some of Cadiz's farmland?
Yeah, no, so we can't do anything THC related yet at Cadiz for a number of reasons, both the local laws as well as the fact that Cadiz is a publicly traded company. So everything at Cadiz is strictly hemp, strictly by the 2018 Farm Bill, all the compliance that goes around that. Our THC operations are currently all up in where Scott and I live in Santa Barbara, in that area. So we currently grow on the THC side mostly in greenhouses. And this, so one of the nice things about what we're doing here is we're learning how to take our greenhouse expertise and bring it to the true, large scale agricultural format at Cadiz. We get to, do some of those learnings on the hemp side, but they'd be applicable on both pathways. So you are right that hemp and cannabis can be in conflict with each other, not because there's inherently anything broken about them, but because THC is very specific to not having pollen, whereas hemp is less so. And so you could have pollen drift between the two in a typical operation, which would negatively impact the cannabis side.
I do think it's important to remember that we are in a really isolated environment out in the Eastern Mojave Desert. And so there's always been, from a law enforcement perspective, there's always been a concern about who is growing what and how to evaluate that and stay compliant. And so marijuana is not legal in San Bernardino County. Hemp is. And so I think the first thing we'd want to say is just at scale that we're capable of supporting. We have nearly 10,000 acres of land, which are in a position to ultimately host a very large hemp operation and hemp farming. And that's all sun raised and open air. And the reason one of the things that we have confirmed through our trials and our first true commercial harvest is that there aren't any pests. Mm-hmm. So you're able to farm open air in the location that we have, where you probably couldn't do it in other areas. We're not adjacent or butting up to any urban areas where you're going to have typical odor issues or really no noise associated with the farming activity. So we're isolated. We're really within an envelope of federal land all around us. So the water supply is protected. Nobody's going to be dumping harmful chemicals into the ground. We have zero risk of contamination at any point. So we are really kind of in a Fort Knox environment around what we're growing. And the second point I would make about this is we have benefited from being completely embraced by law enforcement. We made the early decision to connect with law enforcement, invite them into the operation, give them a tour, explain to them what was going on. And we have been repaid in spades with their support for our operation. And so we're very excited about being able to continue to educate law enforcement and to grow our operation with under their watchful eye.
Yeah.
And then would you, yeah, go ahead, Graham.
I was just going to say, worth noting how unprecedented the lack of need for pesticides is in outdoor farming, and particularly how important that is to both hemp and cannabis, right? Both of those crops are tested very specifically in the case of THC cannabis down to the parts per billion level for 66 different pesticides before it can clear into the retail supply chain. So the fact that we learned that we truly didn't need to use any chemicals, is great from a business point of view. It's great from a consumer story point of view. It's great from an environmental point of view, and it is truly a very unique thing. And then separately on the law enforcement side, everything Scott said is 100% true. One of the things that I think the society is kind of learning on the macro level is just because marijuana is banned doesn't mean that marijuana doesn't get grown in an area. What it means is no legal marijuana gets grown in an area. So one of the mechanics that we're seeing play out in many different avenues is the idea that law enforcement starts to prefer a few licensed, regulated, by the books, tax-paying entities that do the marijuana growing, because then they generate tax revenue. The tax revenue, typically the first place it lands is in an enforcement budget, so that the law enforcement can then go shut down the folks who are growing unregulated, right? And so, if the drug war, if you could just say, hey, no to drugs and they're gone, we wouldn't still be talking about it, right? I mean, the reality is that's not how it works. And so across the board, we're seeing there's kind of shifting preference to, hey, let's pick the right players for this and then go shut down the wrong players, and the right players fund the ability to do that. So, I think we'll continue to see that. We're starting to see, traction on that on the federal level. And I think once that clicks into place, we'll see that accelerate as well.
So a couple follow-up questions just to your point quickly. Number one, the pesticides, kind of what I've always heard is that it's easier to get rid of, not use pesticides growing indoors as opposed to outdoors. And this might dovetail into my kind of second question, following up on what you just said, which is, do you feel like what you've gained from partnering with Cadiz is the ability to know how to scale in terms of growing marijuana, cannabis, to scale it in a way that suits kind of your narrative, which is environmentally friendly and sustainable and all that? Do you feel like it's given you the ability, the capital, the structure to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Cadiz it's a unicorn of a location, right? The idea that you could have virgin, so organically certifiable land at scale in the sun with all the water that you need and not have anything else around you. Like I'm not sure, I don't think there's another place like it. Certainly in California, hard for me to imagine where else in the country it would be. So, if assuming that you value, which we do, the idea to be, pesticide and eco-friendly, free, to have, naturally occurring water that's not taking from other uses, organic certification, when and where it makes sense, and, all the sun of the Southern California region together, and be able to make it as big as you want, that's about as good as it gets.
And then do you feel like you're getting ready for kind of, because you said that because Cadiz is NASDAQ listed and they have to abide by certain things that, that you guys have to kind of like 280E and draconian regulations, you guys still have to abide by all of that, and you still have to wait for that to loosen up. You can't kind of say that you're under Cadiz's structure.
Yeah, no, we don't get any freebies on the THC side, that's for sure. I mean, the regulations of hemp compared to other crops, I think, are daunting for many farmers. For us, relative to THC, it's easy, right? I mean, the THC applications this thick, the hemp applications that thick. the alfalfa farmers are not used to an application, right? So it really depends on where you are in that spectrum. But I do think we see where things are starting to go. The Safe Banking Act was just actually reintroduced this week. The MORE Act, which would deschedule cannabis, passed the House last year. Now Kamala Harris, who's the lead sponsor of the bill, is the deciding vice president and the deciding vote in the Senate. So Schumer and Booker and a number of other folks out there are being very forward about their interest in moving that legislation forward. I think it's good for a lot of reasons, but the real tip of the spear on it is from a social justice point of view, and the fact that the war on drugs is not truly a war on drugs, it's actually a war on people, and specific people at that, and it's time for that to end, and that has an urgency beyond the tax revenue that it will generate for the federal government, which needs it now, and beyond the jobs that it will generate, which we need now. But the idea that there's people sitting in jail for things that I do as a business is phenomenally wrong, not because of what I'm doing, but because they're sitting in jail. And so making progress to fixing that is something that I think all of us need to put on the top of the priority list.
Absolutely. Scott, where are you at in terms of, I couldn't agree more in terms of the social justice aspect, because there's a lot of talk of exactly what you're saying, that some senators are close in passing probably what looks like the first pin to drop is going to be the safe banking regulations. But I think, it ignores the huge, ridiculously absurd, elephant in the room. Scott, you said that you guys have a relationship with law enforcement. What's your sense of where we're going nationally or federally in terms of kind of not just righting the wrongs, but coming together? Like, I imagine that you guys are also looking forward to the day where you can just be one entity.
Well, I think we do appreciate the platform, and again, the fully integrated platform and being able to move into that. And you can't sit here where we are today and not imagine a world where either hemp or cannabis could be grown at Cadiz. We're aware of that. We also are mindful of the strong feelings of our host county right now in favor and support of hemp. In fact, I would say to you, Rena, that we've probably had every member of the San Bernardino County Board of Supervisors and most of their legal team and staff, in addition to law enforcement, out at the farm, becoming interested in that. And I think so. At a first level, we're actually looking forward to clearer, more consistent regulation of hemp and CBD in California. And we think there's a bill that's in the California legislature this year, and we think it's going to pass. And we think that the uniformity and clarity in the regulation is going to help us. We think as the sort of social awareness of the benefits and uses of CBD and the hemp side and marijuana as well, we see and think that there will be a national opening. We wonder whether at a state level it's going to be 50 state legal. The decriminalization doesn't necessarily, on the banking side, and those opportunities don't necessarily mean that every state and every county is going to be open to it. We think that's probably a longer term pathway. But I think from the standpoint of the federal government decriminalizing and for opening the doors to allow states to make their decisions on a state-by-state basis, I think that's much more likely to happen. And in particular, in this government, in this time, in this place, there are a lot of reasons to believe that is going to become more liberalized. But there's going to need to be uniformity and standards to allow that to happen. There's going to have to be embracing of those uniform standards and clarity about who can do what and where under that formulation. And until that happens, you're going to see reticence on the part of public companies to want to take risk, right? So I think California is on the right step. I see the federal government moving in the right places. And I'm again going to reemphasize, we have a partner who is able to completely ferret out what the rules and regs are on the THC side. Applying that same expertise to hemp gives us great confidence that our CBD and our hemp-related products are going to be 50 state legal. we believe we'll get there.
Sorry. And do you see it going like going forward, CBD, hemp, THC, cannabis, all three kind of lanes?
So I'm going to say that, you know, Graham is our retail expert here. I think our expectation here is we're working in the lanes created by our partner, but we've had dialogue about a 50-state legal CBD, 50-state legal hemp brand, and being combined with cannabis in some of the markets. But Graham?
Yeah, you know, I think the lens I like to use is that kind of cannabinoid product lens, right? So if you think, you know, THC, people know, CBD, they know pretty extensively. There's 100 other cannabinoids out there that are produced by the cannabis plant. There's selectively bred cannabis that we call marijuana that has THC in it, and then there's selectively bred cannabis that has less than 0.3% THC, which we call hemp. The rest of the cannabinoids, no one even really, you know, talks about. So if you start thinking about it through that lens, you start thinking, you know, that you could have, you know, it's almost like alcoholic and non-alcoholic beer, right? Like I think there will be a patchwork of states, because even at the federal level, no one is proposing that you dictate to states what they must do. You're basically just saying that you can do what you want to do, which frankly, I think the federal government as an entity owes it to itself to do that, right? I mean, they're so far behind, I think 47 out of 50 states now, that they're pretending that this is Schedule 1, the worst thing in the world, where 47 out of 50 states have said you can have access to it. 15 of them have said you can have access to it, just like alcohol. I think undermines the entire authority of the federal government. If you can ignore them here, where else do you get to ignore them? So that aside, I think they're going to rectify that. And then I think we will have a patchwork where we're going to see some states, I'll use California, where you're going to have access to all the cannabinoids, maybe in different retail locations, but you'll be able to get them everywhere. And then you'll have some states where they may not allow THC, but they do allow CBD. You'll probably even see states where they don't allow more than X% THC, but they allow under it. And so if you think about that, again, from the cannabinoid product view, it's quite possible that we will have a tincture in California that has THC and CBD in it. And then we will make a tincture that is, you know, this intended for the same use, but minus the THC for sale in other places. So it's going to be a bit of a regulatory patchwork, but I think in general, we will make forward progress on all fronts on it.
Speaking of protracted processes and long journeys to kind of the end line, and Scott, you mentioned the Cadiz Water Project that you guys have going. It's been a long process. How confident are you that that's going to be something that's going to come to fruition in the near term?
Well, I think we've bet the farm on it, so to speak. We're pretty confident that what we are accomplishing through our water project is a prolific conservation project, and the idea that we would continue to allow 9 billion gallons of water to evaporate every year from these natural dry lakes, while we have 1 million people in California who are in need of clean, reliable water, is just unfathomable. And so we are very excited about some of the recent developments in the last 4 or 5 months. And in addition to the land where we are and the expansion of the well field, which is great and suitable, versatile for both providing water for our farming products as well as exporting water to external uses. So we have continued to fully develop that. But along the way, we have quietly done something that my kids are particularly proud of, and I am too, because it's consistent with the ethos of operating sustainable business and the old Jack Johnson reduce, reuse, recycle. We had located an existing natural gas pipeline, which runs 220 miles from Kern County down through upper Los Angeles County, crosses over into San Bernardino County, and ultimately has its terminus at Cadiz. And we are in the process of repurposing that line so it doesn't transport natural gas, but it transports water. And in December of last year, we announced that the federal government had approved the underlying right-of-way for us to transport water through that pipeline in addition to assigning us some other rights that were held by the owner of the pipeline, Kinder Morgan. So we think that that pipeline, married to our base project, gives us a whole bunch of new opportunities. And it also introduces us into a new business, which is a standalone independent business, which will allow us to take water from willing buyers and sellers and connect them. So if you have a water short area that needs true wet water delivered to augment what they already have, that we now have a new pipeline infrastructure that can connect somebody who has water, say on the east side of Kern County, and wants to move it into another portion, San Bernardino County. And there are probably 7 disadvantaged communities along that route. I could go through the economics of how cruel it is to these communities to be short of water and what they have to pay for it, when you could simply pay a similar amount and actually get water. And how these rate economics work is it's really crazy and devastating to these communities. So we think we have all the fundamentals in place in order for us to implement this project, and we can. And rest assured, however, that the use of that pipeline and the project itself are completely compatible with supporting our farming arrangement. We have the right, as granted by San Bernardino County, our host county, to take up to 50,000 acre-feet of water a year. And that is sufficient amount of water to take care of our hemp aspirations, as well as meet our water project demands.
And what would you say, because, you know, what you're describing, and I think why your kids are such fans of that is because, you know, people that are fans of sustainability, which tends to skew younger, fans of sustainability and fans of being, you know, environmentally responsible, those all sound like good things. But there are some detractors. What's your point against the detractors? And do you feel like that's been kind of the challenging hurdle that has prevented it from happening up till this point?
Yeah, I think that we do have detractors. And I think it's fair to say in the modern world, every infrastructure project of any kind has detractors. There is immediately mobilized opposition to any infrastructure improvement, and particularly in California. And so I would say, insofar as from the date I started with the company in December of 2008, so we're now out a decade, we have been subjected to peer review, voluntary commissions. I brought people from all over the world through my relationships from as far away as Western Australia, and the former head of the United States Geological Survey, professors. We did advanced peer review. We went through an evaluation of the project, which was probably the most open, transparent, and certainly the most stringent environmental review of any water project in the history of California. Thousands and thousands of people testified, multiple hearings, lots of testimony taken. And ultimately, the environmental impact report for the project was approved, finding that there was, wait for it, not a single adverse environmental impact. Now imagine that. And that wasn't by accident, Rena. When I came on, I thought that the only way that a private sector company would be able to operate in this space was if it did no harm. And we set a bar for ourselves that we would self-regulate, and we would not take or try to do the largest project that you could do, but to do one that would have zero environmental impacts. So it was certified in that fashion, but that wasn't enough. We also wanted to satisfy the local host county, which was San Bernardino, and we went through an independent permitting process there as well. So we got a certified EIR. The county of San Bernardino approved it, finding again no harm. And even though they concluded there was no harm, they put on top of it additional conditions to satisfy environmental opposition. That wasn't enough, and they sued. We went through 6 lawsuits, a trial, 6 on appeal. We won every one of them. We were 12-0 in the courts. So at that point in time, we had been reviewed by 2 public agencies and the courts, and found to have no environmental harm. And I can tell you that there have been subsequent reviews that find the same thing. So you say, well, why the opposition? And I think that as an intermediary for us once reported Scott, it's not so much about the project. The project itself is quite innovative. It's what you're doing with it. And the concern is, although thinly veiled, is that the water gets on a pipeline and goes to places which supports new development and economic growth. And if you're not in favor of continued growth and new housing, particularly in elite coastal areas, that's a good place to weigh in to stop it from happening. There are countless papers and presentations that have been written by people, I think, in a very cruel way, to indicate that their intention is to deny these infrastructure services to rural America and to suburban areas because they think it creates sprawl. And so my opinion is that the money behind the opposition comes from what I would call traditional no growth activism, and this is a proven strategy on their part to restrict water supplies that thereby impair housing. Now, that's not all, and we remain open and relentless in our pursuit of the truth and data gathering, and we're up to it now. So I believe we will prevail because in the end, data matter. And if data do not indicate that what you're doing is going to cause harm, the loudest voice in the end can't prevail, because data impeaches those allegations. And we just need to keep being open, transparent, and strong-willed in moving forward.
It's interesting. Graham was saying that you guys had an advantage with not dealing with THC. I think that advantage was kind of taken up by these kinds of protocols that you guys are dealing with. I mean, it's really a dance to be able to navigate this space. As you said, there's so many variables that you have to hold in your head and strategize as a business leader. What kind of, I mean, keeping into the theme of, asking CEOs questions of how they lead companies, what drives you to kind of keep going and not say, okay, look, this isn't working out, let's do this and the other thing that we're planning on doing and leave this water project alone? Is it the belief that what you're doing is right? Is it the drive to kind of show that business and sustainability can go hand in hand? What is it that pushes you to kind of keep going and pursuing this?
So this sounds cliche, right? But you can't get up out of bed and become a combatant on behalf of a cause unless you believe in it. Mm-hmm. I've spent 36 years in this space, in the water space, knowing and learning about water. And Graham used the phrase unicorn, or the characterization unicorn, and that's really true. There isn't an asset or configuration of assets, in my opinion, anywhere in the Western United States that is similar to Cadiz because of its isolation, because of the prolific water supply, and because natural processes are basically dumping 9 billion gallons of water into the atmosphere every year. If we looked at that as being dumped into the ocean, or if we calculated the loss off of Lake Mead every year, that's evaporation. We characterize that as loss. We say that is bad. That's not helpful. We want to put our water to use. And in my experience, the use of water is tied to so much social good and can be directed to provide people with reliable supplies so that we don't have dramatic rate spikes that go up and down as shortages imposed. That it's necessary for the state of California to meet its fair share of housing. And one of the problems we have with the prices of housing is that there's not enough product, and not enough product where it needs to be. And it is true for 40 years in this state that the principal way to defeat housing is by denying it water. That is the experience of California. Some people got the idea to do that in the 70s. Actually, where they learned to do it was in a place called Marin, and then the second place was in Santa Barbara. They went into a moratorium to stop building houses, and it was largely on the basis of water. So it gets me up to face the day and to move forward on the basis that the water project is the right thing. Conserving water is the right thing. Bringing water for people where they need it is the right thing to do. But it's not only that, right? You have to, the thing that I believe strongly, Rena, was from the beginning with a prolific unicorn asset, it needed a holistic land management strategy. And one piece of that ultimately is dedicating vast quantities of that land to permanent open space. But that's not the only use, right? We can contribute to a very interesting growth opportunity that provides a lot of public good by investing in a product, in a farm opportunity like hemp. We haven't talked about the prospect of maybe using or responding to the Patagonia call for bring hemp home, right? Their products their hemp is raised in China. They want to do it in the United States. There will be an opportunity for us to do that eventually. So we think hemp is a great ancillary opportunity for us to pursue at the same time we're doing the water project. And I'll give you another example. Fiber optic cable in rural America is a very sought after commodity in the present moment, because as we move to the post-COVID world, there are going to be people in rural America, in suburbia, that need better fiber optic access. And one of the things we're exploring now is they have a submersible fiber optic cable that you can run in a water pipe. And our intention is we're going to look really hard at taking fiber optic cable and pulling it through that 220-mile pipeline while we run water through it. So we can't stop innovating. Shareholders need it, but more importantly, the world as we know it needs it. Private sector is capable of great innovation, and we hope to contribute to that. Hope that was sort of long-winded, but
no, I'm happy to hear your full answer. I think it's good to give a full answer because it deserves that kind of scope, I think. Graham, I was going to ask you, because you're coming from, before you partnered with Cadiz, Glasshouse Farms is something that you guys are also known for your sustainability, your environmental, emphasis on being environmentally friendly. I imagine this was something that you looked into and talked about before doing the deal with Cadiz. What is your take, or is this something that you have to answer for, or is it pretty separate in terms of people are mostly asking you about the glasshouse aspect of Cadiz and not necessarily the water aspect?
Yeah, so I mean, less about water for us, but I think, sustainability and being environmentally friendly is a core, value and part of the ethos of our company. I think you talked a little about like what gets you, out of bed, and, when things aren't easy, why do you keep going? Cannabis certainly falls in that definition of not easy, right? I mean, we've been forging a path that's one of the most over-regulated, over-taxed industries. We, started at a time when you weren't even exactly sure what the rules were, and yet we kept persevering. And I think it comes down to being purpose driven, right, and having a passion. For me personally, I think the world is a better place with cannabis in it. And when I say cannabis, I include THC and CBD, marijuana and hemp. I think it's a plant that has tremendous upsides for our society. All from the pain, medical, fiber, food, protein, soil remediation, all the above, right? Like that all comes from the cannabis plant. Back in the days of hemp for victory, like we were using it to make ropes and things like that. They were encouraging farmers to grow it because we needed its supplies. Now we found that far from being Schedule 1, no known medical benefit and a high potential for abuse is how you define Schedule 1. It is tremendously beneficial. A lot of it's anecdotal, but only anecdotal because our laws have prevented actual research by scientists and doctors to figure out the specifics of that. I mean, we do have our first now FDA certified cannabis-derived drug, Epidiolex. It's a CBD drug. Another company just made an offer of $7.2 billion for it. Dr. Orrin Devinsky, who is the medical advisor on the development of Epidiolex, is actually a board advisor for Glasshouse. So, very much taking that perspective of how do we continue to make the world a better place, to the whole, social justice side of things. I mean, cannabis has been illegal for less than 1% of the time that people have been using it, right? So the natural state of a plant is not to be illegal, right? I mean, if a plant and nature are not synonymous, I don't know what is. Nature is not an illegal thing. We need to come back and not stop tearing families apart over a plant, start healing people with a plant, start healing communities with a plant, start preserving our environment with a plant, right? So all those things, like that's that's what puts my feet on the ground in the morning, despite the fact that it's hard. So, I think in partnership with Cadiz, we have the ability to scale all of that up. We have the ability to make inroads with law enforcement so they understand what a good operator looks like. We have inroads to communities to develop industries that may further, be followed by THC later on or may not. But either way, we can make the world a better place. We can use the water and the resources that Cadiz has available. As Scott mentioned, there's millions of gallons that evaporate, right? So you could almost think of the agriculture that we're doing there as a freebie from a water point of view, because we're just using that water to feed a plant instead of letting it evaporate. Instead, frankly, when it goes in the plant, it ends up transpiring anyway. We get to do both, right? It's a 2-for-1. So, I think putting all those pieces together is very much in sync with our goals as a company and our belief on, why cannabis makes the world a better place.
Rena, I just listening to Graham, I would like to make the following point. We've received no opposition.
Yeah.
None. Zero opposition to our use of water for hemp. So you have to think about that, right? So when we talk about what the nature of the opposition is, there seems to be an embracement of, what, if you farm hemp, that's just fine with us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and do you feel like that's the understanding of what hemp is and can do?
Well, I think it's interesting because some of the people who would be characterized as project opponents are pro-hemp for all the reasons that Graham is describing, and the sustainability pathway. I also say it's a little inconsistent from the standpoint you are pumping the water, and if you're claiming that the water project's going to have impacts on the environment, maybe they're from the perspective that it's not worth it as a water supply on the grid. They prefer us to do something else, but for growing hemp, it's okay. We haven't interviewed them. I just think that we've been embraced totally and heard no one objecting to the notion of us growing hemp out there.
Got it. The other thing I wanted to touch on in terms of leading the company is the financial side. Something that we've talked about on the Cannabis Investing podcast is, especially in this burgeoning industry, with all the volatility, and it's been hard. I mean, it's less a problem for you guys because, of where you play in the ecosystem, but in general for a cannabis company in terms of raising capital. So something that we've talked about is, how much do you dilute the shares? Do you take on debt? Do you issue shares? What is the kind of ethos at the company from the financial picture? What's your take on that in terms of leading a publicly traded company and how you navigate that?
Well, I think we raise capital through public offerings typically, right? So we have the ability to go to the market and raise equity for whatever our needs and purposes are. And so long as we are farming hemp among a host of other crops, we don't really have an additional challenge for that. So we do have a mix of if our market cap is 350, 400 million, we have an enterprise value of about $500 million. And so we do have principally a senior secured debt of about 75 million, but for the most part, we have gone to the market when we needed revenue, and we raise it in connection with both initiatives. I think that there has been a lot more interest in us and what we're doing on the hemp side. Obviously, there was an initial boom in terms of we had lots of people crawling all over us and wondering exactly what we're going to do. And I think we've been communicating that we're going to move into this space incrementally as product development goes along. And so we're excited about that. As Graham said many times, we're not farming to farm. We're farming to earn and to do well based upon the products we're generating. So in accordance with that scale, I think if we were to go out and say, okay, we're going to put in 5,000 acres, would we be able to raise equity on doing that? I don't think we'd have any problem whatsoever. It's just a straight function of what's the return look like as compared to pistachios or lemons or another agricultural crop. And one of the great things that we know about hemp is the trajectory to return is pretty compressed. You're not waiting 6 years for lemons to mature.
And when does it make sense to issue shares? How would you say that when it does make sense?
Well, we have probably 20 million in working cash today. And we have a plan in place to continue to do compatible agriculture. So I think we are going to work with Graham, and as we understand what the maturity of the product market is, and we have a known exit or a distribution point for how we're going to approach it, then we would go to the equity markets and issue shares around ostensibly a project initiative. So in the past, we've said we want to do lemons. We've gone to the market. We've raised equity around that in a private offering or in telling our story and doing it that way. So we're not at a place yet, but the other guy on this screen is going to be with us as we sit and evaluate what those opportunities are. I think we're going to be in a continued refinement and evaluation study period in 2021. And as we learn more about the project development side, I would expect that as we come to the end of 2021, we could be there.
Yeah, I think, I like to think of it kind of in two phases. One is developing the formula, and then the second is scaling the formula, right? So right now what we're doing is we're developing the formula both on the cultivation side, taking the learnings from the last one, feeding it back into what we're starting this month, as well as on the product side, taking the output of the last cultivation and doing product development and testing product market fit and figuring out what things work. And then that learning goes back into the ecosystem to feed the cultivation for the next iteration. Once we've kind of developed that formula to a way that we say, we've got it, then the next thing is to scale it, start adding zeros behind it. So, I think that's the slow, steady, incremental approach that we've used successfully in the past. And I think, frankly, Cadiz has used successfully in their lane on the water side, which I think ends up being a lot higher odds of success than the kind of boom and bust cycles of going all in without knowing where you're trying to get to, and then being surprised when things shift and you're left kind of hanging out there. So that's our philosophy and our path on a go forward basis.
So I think, Rena, too, we're not being idle, right? So while the learning goes on that Graham describes, the ground is getting ready, and we will be in a position to turn on the switch as soon as we need to, or in whatever increment we want.
Well, that's the thing I think that we're seeing is this next phase of growth for companies is the ones that have built a strong base and that have got all their ducks in a row, and the ability to scale when that timing is right. I think that we're seeing it start to come to the marketplace. Those things start to be proven out. And I think as the years go on, it will start even more so a real strong developing of the ecosystem. I think, or a more solid definition of the ecosystem, I think, will come out. The thing I wanted, so you guys are going to the plan is to expand past California.
Yeah, from a product point of view, certainly. From a cultivation point of view, it's Cadiz. But the goal, the really nice thing, right? And again, the way that I kind of think of it is, on THC, our borders are California's borders, right? There's no interstate commerce because of the federal government's current position on that. You can't ship interstate. So everything we do in cannabis, THC cannabis, stays within California. With the 2018 Farm Bill, that's not the case for hemp and hemp-derived products, right? So one of the things that's exciting about this is a lot of the stuff that restricts us on THC doesn't on CBD, right? We can make products that go to all 50 states. We can post an ad on Instagram, Facebook. We can have banking. We can have Visa cards, right? All these things are not available on a THC product, right? So the idea that we can start to grease the skids, that we can develop cannabinoids besides THC on a national, and frankly we could on an international market, is part of what makes hemp so exciting. Is all these barriers that constrain us are gone when you start talking about hemp instead of marijuana.
I was going to ask, any thoughts of going international?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that precludes us. I mean, obviously, you got to pay attention to the regulatory environment in each country, but for the most part, other countries are further ahead than the U.S. The U.S. is the laggard on this because the stigma of marijuana bled over to hemp for so long. It made no sense, right? If you're worried about psychoactivity, you don't find it in hemp, but yet, our laws are, we still have our head in the sand on this. So most other places are more lenient versus more stringent. So I think the international market, I think, Southern California organic hemp, that's a special, that appellation means something. And not to say anything bad about China, but we hear it from Patagonia and others, like that's not their preferred supply chain for lots of reasons: the distances, the regulatory laws, the pesticide uses, the labor conditions, all sorts of things, right? Southern California organic grown hemp is kind of what the world wants.
So I think the last question I want to ask you guys is, as CEOs of companies, what's been the best lesson that you've learned and what's been the hardest lesson to learn? And if those are the same thing, then kind of, well, let's start there. I don't want to make it too complicated.
Let's see. So, I mean, I think one of the, I like quotes. So I think of quotes often. And a few of the quotes I like are, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So a lot of it starts with the mindset of, this is something that we're capable of doing. And then another one, Steve Jobs quote, which is 1,000 no's for every yes, right? You need to have focus, and you can't get distracted by every shiny object and expect to get anything done. So you have to have a focus from the team. I like thinking the company is, a company is really just, it's a collection of people with a common vision working together to achieve that goal, right? And so if you think about it from that point of view, it really comes down to the people and the team. And we think a lot about how do we, in agriculture, unfortunately, a lot of times people get treated more like tools in a shed than individuals. And we take a intentional approach to having people be part of the team. Everybody that we employ gets paid more than minimum wage. They have health benefits, they have sick days and paid time off. Our turnover from an agricultural perspective is probably 1/30 of the average. And so really kind of trying to develop that the company as a business, a new industry. We're doing both of these things at the same time, but also as a home for our employees and treating the people who work with us and for us at least as well as we treat investors and customers and things like that. And thinking of that as a whole kind of holistic ecosystem, I think is it sounds philanthropic or like charity, but I think it's truly a strategic advantage. And if you think about it like that, and you think about sustainability, not just from the environmental side, but from the business side, right? A business that is sustainable itself so it can do more good, right? I mean, you can cut too deep. You can try and be too environmental to the point that you're out of business and you end up doing net less good than if you find ways that you can merge those things together. So I don't know if I directly answered your question, but certainly some of the ways that I think about the challenges that we deal with and how to develop and grow into what we're trying to be as a company.
Well, you certainly brought up a point that I really, really like, which is, the fact that sustainable building isn't just about the altruistic nature of being sustainable. It really does make sense on all these different levels, and not just on an environmental level, but the environment of the business. I could not agree more. And I feel like the entire holistic approach to things, I think, is always the right way to go, because it just makes the most sense any way you look at it. So whether or not you answered my question to the T, I accept your answer. It's okay.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Scott, you wanna share with us your
yeah. So look, I'll be succinct and just say that when I came to this job, I had a predilection for holistic management and thinking about the corresponding interactions of all the things that you're going to do, and to recognize that you couldn't manage just one business segment without considering the impact on others. And impact on other segments, impact on community, impact on business relations. And there is a sort of a continuity that you want to insist upon, and a rigor of open, transparent, do good, do no harm. And those things, that ethic has to be uniform in every business segment, because if it is not, then your credibility and your ability to execute is undermined. So that's point one. And then point two, I truly knew this, but I'm constantly reminded that you don't tell data what to do. Data tells you. And you have to be prepared, open, and willing to assess the data for what it is, know what additional data is required, but at some point be able to make decisions upon and react and pivot on the basis of what data are telling you. And we do see people who are stubborn and make mistakes, and their business fails on the basis that they just weren't listening to the data or not giving it the attention it requires.
Yes, exactly. Look at Blockbuster Video. Guys, thank you so much for taking the time. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your insights in such a full, expressive way. So thanks again for coming on.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.